In 1997, an elite university, University of Berkeley, California, changed the admissions process when accepting students. They decided to accept students entirely on SAT scores. SAT scores, by the way, test your math and grammar skills. It's a close cousin to IQ tests, which mostly test your cognitive ability. The results of the admissions based on SATs were shocking. 3.5% of the entire campus was made up of East Asian Americans, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. And yet East Asian Americans only made up 3 million of the American population. That's around 1%. Indian Americans, too, were disproportionately accepted, as they made 0.8% of Berkeley's admissions, yet Indian Americans made up around 0.2% of the American population. Lastly, Jews, who were counted as whites, were disproportionately accepted into UC Berkeley. Whites overall, though, made up only 33% of the campus, despite being 75% of the total American population. Blacks made up 6%, despite being 12% of the American population. And as the years went on, the white and black populations at Berkeley decreased, as Asian populations either increased or stayed the same, almost always disproportionately represented. In any given year, usually 30 to 35% of the entire campus is white, and 2 to 5% is black, which are terribly low numbers. So what do we get from this case study? Well, blacks and whites, particularly non-Jewish whites, lack the same level of academic achievement as South and East Asians. We've seen this not only in UC Berkeley, but in the Ivy League schools, MIT, Stanford, and so on. If you don't care about race, then those figures don't mean anything, and more power to you. But if you do care, where do you go from here? If you were a policymaker, what could you do to make those numbers statistically more representative? That is to say, what can you do to have 75% of the campus be white and 12% be black? It doesn't have to be just about race, too. If you want more women in education, for example, what do? Well, there are two approaches you can take, the Libertarian and the Marxist approach. The Libertarian approach is, if you want a more statistically representative population in higher education, change culture, change people's value systems, convince others to cherish education and the nurturing environment that creates a well-rounded academic. So, for example, create a charity or foundation that emphasizes the importance of being a scholar or being an amazing parent. Basically, do whatever you can to change society without the use of governmental force. The Marxist approach, on the other hand, first makes the assumption, whether correct or incorrect, that there is a victim and an assailant. In this case, the victim will be white and black people. In other cases, it may be men oppressing women. Then the Marxists would argue that governmental intervention is needed to force these institutions of higher education to discriminate against the well-qualified students, preferring the less qualified students over them. Marxists call this usage of force positive discrimination. It's primarily been used to assist black students into getting into higher education over other students, when these black students might not have the marks, the drive, or the intelligence to succeed in that particular institution of higher education. It's also been used to get more women into the STEM fields. In the Marxist worldview, in order to solve the problem of what they view is discrimination, they use discrimination against other people. That means discrimination, according to a Marxist, is both the problem and the solution. The Libertarian approach itself has no philosophical problems. There's no governmental force, for example. The onus is on you to change society by offering a service or convincing people, if that's what you want to do. And more power to you. I don't have anything against that. Honestly, if you want more black or white people in higher education because you want more members of your community to be educated and you're not going to use governmental force, then that's great. I totally support that. On the other hand, the Marxist approach of positive discrimination has tons of philosophical problems associated with it, especially when you consider that there is no legal method of discrimination being practiced against women or blacks. There's no discrimination that they can point towards, yet they blindly use this argument. Let's go through the problems of the Marxist approach. Number one, it's anti-meritocratic. Meritocracy is the idea that anyone, including you, should have the liberty to climb the social, political, and economic ladder into the corridors of success through abilities, innovation, and hard work alone, and nothing but yourself or lack of talent should be able to stop you from achieving knowledge or the good life. The idea of building meritocratic societies and cultures dates back to Aristotle's philosophical tradition. It was also the driving force of everything from the Roman Empire to MLK's civil rights movement and the worldwide anti-decolonization movements. The benefits of meritocracy are obvious. It gives people who work hard what they deserve to earn. It judges people on the content of their character, their merits, and not their race or gender. It also ensures societal progress by investing hard work and honing talent. If you're a student who's genuinely dumb but studies, you're going to get decent grades. And you're probably going to go to a decent college, or at least go to a college that matches your abilities and what you've worked for. If you're not that kind of student, though, and you're honestly dumb, you deserve to get what you have. And that's how it is for all avenues of life. So why does that have to change in the realm of higher education? That is to say, why is it that people whose grades have proven them to either be less intelligent or less hardworking are preferred over people who are more intelligent and harder working? In any other system of thought, picking someone who's less qualified makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, a black, or a white, it's all the same. You pick the person who's most deserving. And the most deserving person is a person who can demonstrate that they're the most qualified for the position. If that means demonstrating through your GPA or SAT scores, so be it. It's not racist that Asians happen to perform better than whites and blacks. When you don't go the meritocratic route, not only is that unfair to the people who have worked harder than you, but it also has a tendency to stifle progress. In academia's case, positive discrimination stifles intellectualism, because now we have the most intelligent and hardworking students getting a pass over people who are not the most intelligent and hardworking. And why? Because we have to get black people or women into these positions. And why do we have to get them into these positions? I don't know, Marxism? These institutions of higher education don't have a policy of discrimination. And we can talk about improving our communities or primary schools. That's all great and all. But still, that doesn't justify affirmative action or quotas. And oftentimes, these less qualified people you see put into these positions can't compete with other students. This leads me to my second reason of why the Marxist approach is problematic. Number 2, it encourages failure. According to the Journal of Black Higher Education, and that thing actually exists, by the way, the nationwide college graduation rate for black students as of 2013 is at 46%. For whites, it's at 64%. For Asian Americans, that means Indians, Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese, the number is anywhere from 65% to 70%. Do you notice a pattern here? You want to know the reason why so many black students drop out of university? The reason why so many black students drop out of higher education is because these students are mismatched, and they don't belong in the university they're accepted into because of affirmative actions and quotas. Practices like affirmative actions and quotas place them into schools and programs they're not prepared for, and they could not excel at the same rate as other students. What's the point of going into an Ivy League school, for example, if you're just going to drop out? That isn't to say blacks are incapable of entering into these schools. What I'm saying is that if you don't enter into these schools the meritocratic way, you probably don't have the skills to excel, and you will most likely drop out. The same is true for women who are placed into fields they don't have the skills for and don't have the interest to partake in. It's simple logic, really. In a job or in academia, you pick the person who's most qualified. If you don't pick the person who's most qualified, that person will most likely fail. I'm going to let Thomas Sowell take it away from here.
Intellectuals and race. Quote, a growing body of empirical data shows that black students mismatched with the colleges or universities they attend fail or drop out more often than other students. The problem is not that these black students are unqualified. The problem is that they are mismatched with the college or university that has admitted them for the sake of, quote, diversity. Yeah. Now, what do you mean by mismatched?
Well, I'll give a simple example. When I was teaching at Cornell back in the 60s, the average SAT score of black students at Cornell was at the 75th percentile. The average SAT for the white students in liberal arts was at the 99th percentile. Mm-hmm. We all taught to the students who were at the 99th percentiles. Students who were at the 75th percentile had a hard time trying to keep up. They didn't have the reading speed, they didn't have the mathematical facility, and so on. Had these very same students gone to some place where the other students were at the 75th percentile, they'd have had no problem. Half the black students at Cornell at that time were on academic probation. It was even worse at MIT. The average black student, when this study was done some years ago at MIT, scored in the top 10% nationwide in math. They scored in the bottom 10% at MIT.
So the point is, there are a lot of very good schools in America where they could have gone and been right in the swim of elite institutions, just not at MIT.
That's right.
The reason why I hate affirmative action and quotas is because on one hand, it's clearly unfair and unmeritocratic, It discriminates against people who deserve the position through hard work or honing their talents. But I'm also against affirmative action and quotas because it just doesn't work in any practical sense. It has the opposite effect that Marxists intend it to have. The people they thrust into academia tend to fail. They tend to be worse off, and they would have done much better if they went to Duke University instead of Harvard, for example. In this reporter's humble opinion, the libertarian approach is a far better method of ensuring more people get educated. I'm Jay Feza from the Rebel.media. If you hate affirmative action and quotas like this reporter, like and subscribe to the Rebel.media.